Today we're going to look at the books 5 to 12 of Homer's Odyssey. We left off last time having looked at some of the features of the Homeric epic, and in particular speaking about the relation between the Iliad and the Odyssey and the narrative structure of the poem and the Council of the Gods. We've already talked about that. But books 1 to 4, to some degree, surprisingly, did not begin with a focus on the main hero of the epic, namely the figure of Odysseus. Rather than that, we dealt with the figure of his son and his wife, who had been bereft of him for the last 20 years, while he was not only in his 10 years at the Trojan War, but in his 10 years of wanderings, trying to return home from that same war. And so in an interesting way, the absence of Odysseus is to some degree reflects this the problem in the whole Odyssey, namely that the hero is not present. And this is the very thing that needs to be remedied by his return home. And it is the task of Athena to make sure that that in fact does happen. So as I say, and books 1 to 4 began in the setting of Ithaca. The concluding books of the Odyssey, books 14 and onwards, will again be in that kingdom of Ithaca. But in the meantime, in the interim, we're going to be in different places. Book 5 begins in a very interesting spot in the sense that it has no parallel in terms of the narrative structure of the poem with any of the other books. He is on the island of Ogygia, which is in the midst of the sea, and it in the umbrella, the navel of the world to some degree. So it's a sort of a mystical place. He's in a sense in no man's land. Nobody knows where he is, and he is hidden from the world in that sense. And for that reason, we need to see something else about the nature of the Greek desire for arete, or excellence. Excellence in the Greek understanding, this word arete, A-R-E, with a little hat over it, T-E, or excellence, is of a particular nature. I talked about this to some degree previously. It has to do with moral worth and excellence and achievement, prowess in battle, excellence in speaking, and so forth. All of the things that we connect with a virtuous life. At the same time, it's also involving great wealth and also station in life. So to possess true arete, you must be an aristocrat. You must have great wealth. You must have done great deeds. All of these things are necessary for a person to be considered fully excellent. But there's one final thing about that excellence which is that it needs public recognition. And this is the one thing that Odysseus lacks. He cannot be publicly recognized because he is sequestered away on an island with a nymph who, however beautiful she may be, shields him from the gaze of the world. So no one knows where he is, and he cannot be the excellent man that he strives to be, which all Greeks strive to be, without his fellow Greeks observing him and seeing him in their midst and seeing him come home from his great voyage. And so he begins in the arms of this nymph, whose name is, tellingly, Kalypso. The word Kalypso here, that's literally her name, but it has certain etymological expressions here that are telling. Because the word Kalypso, from which the word or the tree by the name of eucalyptus derives its meaning, a calypso is to cover or to hide. Eucalyptus provides good shade. The prefix eu there means good in Greek, and so a eucalyptus provides good shade. It covers things. Similarly, the word apocalypse is derived from the same verb, calypso, or I hide. And an apocalypse is something that is hidden but now revealed. It comes out from being hidden and is now revealed. Odysseus is in the arms of Kalypso, and because of that, he is miserable. He is hidden. He cannot achieve his arete. And he also cannot, as we can tell without even that Greek understanding, he is heartbroken because he can't return home to his wife and his son and his kingdom. And we looked last time at the consequences of that for the kingdom, which were that there was no justice, because the king was not only the head of his family and the monarch in that sense, he was also the judge and the main instrument of justice. So in his absence, justice has also been absent. And to that extent, the work of Poseidon in keeping him from coming home is not only robbing Odysseus of his arete, but robbing his kingdom of justice. And that will have to be remedied, and it will not be remedied until he can come home. So let me begin then with book 5, with a little reading from the text here, where we read, "Now dawn rose from her bed, where she lay by haughty Tithonus, carrying light to the immortal gods and to mortals. And the gods came and took their places in session, and among them Zeus, who thunders on high. And it is his power that is greatest. And Athena spoke to them of the many cares of Odysseus, remembering, though he was in the nymph's house, she still thought of him." And then she speaks to her father, "Father Zeus, and all other blessed gods everlasting, no longer now. Let one who is a sceptered king be eager to be gentle and kind, be one whose thought is schooled in justice, but let him always rather be harsh and act severely, seeing the way no one of the people he was lord over remembers God like Odysseus. And he was kind, like a father, but now he lies away on an island suffering strong pains in the palace of the nymph Kalypso. And she detains him by constraint, and he cannot make his way to his country. For he has not any ships by him, nor any companions who can convey him back across the sea's wide ridges. And now there are those who are determined to murder his dear son on his way home. He went in quest of news of his father to Pylos, the sacrosanct, and to glorious Lacedaemon." What is Athena saying here? He's saying that Odysseus has been a good man and a just man and acted in accordance with the standards of kingship which all the gods recommend, and they commend for men to follow if they wish to be blessed by the gods. But here is Odysseus, who has done all such things, and he is not only not being rewarded in his life resembles a man who's been cursed for being a bad man. And so therefore, Athena says, and this is a strong moral argument, why would any man then be a good man if the gods will not reward them for their goodness? And then in turn, Zeus, who gathers the clouds, made answer. And he makes the answer which he always does in this situation. "My child, what sort of word has escaped your teeth's barrier? For it is not, is it not this your own intention, as you have counseled it, how Odysseus shall make his way back and punish those others? Then bring Telemachus home skillfully, since you can do this, so that all without harm he can come back to his own country, while the suitors in their ship come back with nothing accomplished." He spoke, and then spoke directly to his beloved son, Hermes. "Hermes, since for other things also you are our messenger, announce to the nymph with the lovely hair our absolute purpose, the homecoming of enduring Odysseus, that he shall come back by the convoy, either of the gods, nor of mortal people, neither of the gods rather, nor of mortal people, but he shall sail on a jointed raft, and, suffering hardships, on the 20th day make his landfall on fertile Scheria, at the country of the Phaiakians, who are near the gods in origin, and they will honor him in their hearts as a god, and send him back by ship to the beloved land of his fathers, bestowing bronze and gold in abundance upon him, and clothing more than Odysseus could ever have taken away from Troy, even if he had escaped unharmed with his fair share of the plunder. For so it is fated that he shall see his people and come back to his house with the high roof and to the land of his fathers. So with these words, the fifth book of the Odyssey begins, back in the Council of the Gods, resetting the epic from where it began, with, again, the Council of the Gods, Athena speaking to Zeus about the terrible plight of Odysseus, and she brings that back to her attention again. And now we shift our gaze away from the land of Ithaca, or where we left off, with Telemachus departed from his island, the suitors planning on murdering him when he returns. And now we shift our gaze to the hero of the Odyssey, namely Odysseus. So we get things in motion. The gods themselves are orchestrating the action. And Zeus has already ordained the timeline according to which this will happen. In 20 days from hence, he will land on the land of the Phaiakians, whose name is Scoria. And the Hermes, the messenger of the gods, goes down now to do his father's bidding. The slayer of Argos, Argeiphontes, wings his way onwards and lands, and he does not find Odysseus. He finds Kalypso, but Odysseus not with her, because Odysseus, of course, is crying his eyes out on the shore. And he sees the goddess Kalypso, line 77, who recognizes him, because, as it says here, the immortal gods are not such as to go unrecognized by one another. And this is not the case in their relations with human beings. So this is one of the things about the gods that makes them so powerful, is they are able to disguise themselves from mortals and can come in the guise of another, such as we saw Athena herself did in the guise of Mentor. But this is one of the threats that they present as well, of being faithful. So Penelope is, when she finally meets her husband Odysseus, she doesn't believe it's him, thinks it could be a god in disguise seeking to get her to be unfaithful to her husband. She won't, even when she looks at him and recognizes him and everyone else does, she won't accept that he is who he says he is. And this is because of the capacity of the gods to deceive. But they cannot deceive one another. And he says, not even if one lives in a far home. But, to repeat what I just said, Hermes did not find great-hearted Odysseus indoors, but he was sitting out on the beach, crying. As before, now he had done, breaking his heart in tears, lamentation, and sorrow. As weeping tears, he looked out over the barren water. But Kalypso, shining among goddesses, questioned Hermes when she had seated him on a chair that shone and glittered. How is it, Hermes of the golden staff? You have come to me. I honor you and love you. But you have not come much before this. Speak what is in your mind. My heart is urgent to do it, if I can. And if it is a thing that can be accomplished, but come in with me so I can put entertainment before you. And so she puts him before him a feast of nectar and ambrosia, which is the food of the immortals, showing to the god the very same hospitality with which Athena herself was received by Telemachus in Odysseus's court at Ithaca. And then he tells her why he's come. And Zeus has commanded, in fact, that she release her captive prize of Odysseus and let him go back home. And Kalypso is not pleased with this command, although she knows she has to obey it. Nonetheless, as we've seen with all the gods, they don't necessarily do it lickety-split without any reservations and without involving themselves in some way to try and undermine the charge that's been given. And so when he speaks, line 116, we're told that Kalypso shuddered, and she answered him in winged words and addressed him. You are hard-hearted, you gods, and jealous beyond all creatures beside. When you are resentful towards the goddesses for sleeping openly with such men as each has made her true husband, so when Dawn of the rosy fingers chose out Orion, all you gods who live at your ease were full of resentment, until chaste Artemis of the golden throne in Ortygia came with a visitation of painless arrows and killed him. And so it was when Demeter of the lovely hair, yielding to her desire, lay down with Iasion and loved him in a thrice turned field. It was not long before this was made known to Zeus, who struck him down with arrows, with the cast of the shining thunderbolt. So the goddesses are not treated with the same standard as the gods. The gods sleep with mortal women as they choose, and it seems like the goddesses are not given equal treatment. This is not fair. Nonetheless, on he goes, and she doesn't want to give him up, but he has to do so, and she says she will do so. And he says, okay, you do it then, and let him go. And she says, but don't delay and don't neglect to do what you've said you would do. So she goes and speaks to Odysseus and tells him of the same. And Odysseus's response to this is to distrust her, which is suitable for somebody who is himself a man who is of many ways and many tricks and is deceitful and expects the same from the gods. He is going to question whether there's not some subterfuge going on here. And so he says this: here is some other thing you devise, O goddess, line 172. It is not conveyance. When you tell me to cross the sea's great open space on a raft, that is a dangerous road and hard. Not even balanced ships rejoicing in a wind from Zeus cross over. I will not go aboard any raft without your goodwill, nor unless, goddess, you can bring yourself to swear me a great oath that this is not some painful trial you are planning against me. So he spake. And Kalypso, shining among divinities, once again, this phrase that is used here to preserve the meter, smiled and stroked him with her hand and spoke to him and named him. You are so naughty, and you will have your own way in all things. See how you have spoken to me and reasoned with me. Earth be my witness in this, and the wide heaven above us, and the dripping water of the Styx. So the world that we are on, the heavens above, and the underworld, the Styx, the river and the underworld, all of these things she swears by, which oath is the biggest and most formidable oath among the blessed immortals. That this is no other painful trial I am planning against you, but I am thinking and planning for you just as I said I would do it, for my own self, if such needs as yours were to come upon me. For the mind in me is reasonable, and I have no spirit of iron inside my heart. Rather, it is compassionate. So she spoke and led the way, and he follows her, and he is then let go. And he thinks that there's still a trick here, and there is to some degree, because even after she said all this and done so in accordance with her oath to do so to Hermes and her stated intention, nonetheless, she's not happy about the fact that Odysseus might love another woman besides him, and Odysseus, being crafty as he is going to guard his beloved Penelope from the jealousy of the goddess here, because she will speak of him there. And she says, son of Laertes, line 203, and seed of Zeus, resourceful Odysseus, are you still all so eager to go back to your own house and the land of your fathers? I wish you well, however you do it. But if you only knew in your own heart how many hardships you are fated to undergo before getting back to your country, you would stay here with me and be the lord of this household and be an immortal. For all your longing once more to look on that wife for whom you are pining all your days here. And yet I think I can claim that I am not her inferior, either in build or stature, since it is not likely that mortal woman can challenge the goddesses for build and beauty. You see the jealousy rising in her as she says this. And then resourceful Odysseus spoke in turn and answered her. Goddess and queen, be not angry with me. I myself know that all you say is true, and that circumspect Penelope can never match the impression you make for beauty and stature. She is mortal after all, and you are immortal and ageless. But even so, what I want all my days I pine for is to go back to my house and see my day of homecoming. And if some good god batters me far on the wine blue water, I will endure it, keeping a stubborn spirit inside me, for already I have suffered much and done much hard work on the waves and in the fighting. So let this adventure follow. So he speaks to her, and she releases him from her bondage, and thereby releases him from this home on which we find himself, a sort of a false home, I submit to you. We've already seen his true home, Ithaca, from which he's been estranged for 20 years, but he's stuck in the center of the world, in a sort of, in a cave, in a psychologists looking at this in their way have seen it as a sort of a womb symbol, the navel of all the waters. And of course, we find Kalypso doing, as a goddess, what Penelope also does. She's weaving on her loom the web of deceit, and he forces her to love her once again. And he leaves there, and we see to some degree the great monomyth, one of the characteristic archetypes that Northrop Frye speaks of here, this monomyth of a heroic journey in which the hero journeys from the real world back into the supernatural world and then returns from it. So this great monomyth that we find in various guises, which is characteristic, I would say, of the ancient classical epic. But he must return in order to tell his story for himself. It's one thing for the rhapsodes to sing of Odysseus. It's another for him to tell his own tale from his own mouth. And this is a false paradise, and he recognizes it. And so this is something interesting being said here by the Greeks about worldly pleasures, which is that they are seductive, and they detract a good man, from what is truly best, which is the virtuous life. We will see this presented in various ways when Odysseus recounts the voyages that he's undergone in his wanderings away from Troy to come to the land of the Phaiakians. And again, as I say to you, he recounts these in the middle portions of the book, in chapters 8 through 12, I believe it was. Is that right? No, 9 through 12. He recounts the tale of his wanderings to the Phaiakians. We'll come to that in a minute. But he realizes that he's going to go, and when she sets him off on a raft and gives him some sort of a cloak to wear, which she says will preserve him from drowning. And she says, the one thing you need to do when you're done with the cloak is you have to cast it back in the waters, and then it will return to me, which he then goes on to do. But I will skip over most of the account there in book 5, again, for lack of time, not because it's not of interest, because it's of great interest, actually. It's a really interesting passage of because as he is cast upon the sea and on his way towards the Phaiakians, none other than Poseidon sees him. He's on his way back from the Ethiopians, and lo and behold, Odysseus, how on earth where did you come from, and how did you get to the point where you're almost getting back home? And he creates a huge storm that threatens to capsize this little raft, and Odysseus is almost dashed to his death on the rocks, and only Athena's intervention prevents him from doing that very thing. And eventually he finds himself on land, throws himself off, and drags himself up to the shore with no clothing on, having been ripped off by the power of the sea, and he falls on the bank of a river and covers himself with leaves. The only thing that will prevent him from dying of exposure in the cold, exhausted, coming out of the sea. So he wakes up and he knows not where he is. And this is interesting, and falls exhausted. And he wakes up, and we'll begin in book 6 here. where we read, "So long-suffering great Odysseus slept in that place in an exhaustion of sleep and weariness. And now Athene went her way to the district and the city of the Phaiakian men, who formerly lived in the spacious land, Hyperia, next to the Cyclops, who were men too overbearing, and who had kept harrying them, being greater in strength. From here, godlike Nosathuos had removed and led a migration, and settled in Scaria, far away from men who eat bread, and driven a wall about the city and built the houses, and made the temples of the gods and allotted the holdings. But now he had submitted to his fate and gone to Hades. And Alcinous, learned in design from the gods, now ruled there." So Alcinous is the king, and his daughter is the one who's going to be the means by which Odysseus is brought into the presence of the Phaiakians. So and it was to his house, we read, line 13, that the gray-eyed goddess Athena went, devising the homecoming of great-hearted Odysseus. And she went into the ornate chamber in which a girl was sleeping, like the immortal goddesses for stature and beauty, Nausicaa, the daughter of great-hearted Alcinous, and beside her 2 handmaidens with beauty given from the graces slept on either side of the post, with the shining doors closed. She, namely Athena, drifted in like a breath of wind to where the girl slept, and came and stood above her head and spoke a word to her, likening herself to the daughter of Dumas, famed for seafaring, a girl of the same age, in whom her fancy delighted. And in this likeness the gray-eyed Athena spoke to her, "Nausicaa, how could your mother have a child so careless? The shining clothes are lying away uncared for, while your marriage is not far off, when you should be in your glory for clothes to wear, and provide too for those who attend you. It is from such things that a good reputation among people springs up, giving pleasure to your father and the lady your mother. So let us go on a washing tomorrow when dawn shows. I too will go along with you and help you, so you can have all done most quickly, since you will not long stay unmarried. For already you are being courted by all the best men of the Phaiakians hereabouts, and you too are a Phaiakian. So come, urge your famous father early in the morning to harness the mules and wagon for you, and it shall carry the sashes and dresses and shining coverlets for you. In this way it will be so much more becoming than for you to go there on foot, for the washing places are a long way from the city." So gray-eyed Athena spoke. And what is she going to do? Well, Nausicaa is going to ask Antinous for the keys to the car. "Daddy, can I take the big car out on the washing trip?" And of course, he will grant her that very thing. So in this case, the chariot. She is going to go wash the clothes by the side of the river, and she goes down there and speaks to him. And we see that one of the things I'm going to skip over here is the way that the daughter addresses the father and the father addresses the daughter, and how appropriate this is and how exemplary it is to Homer's audience. But she harnesses the mules and the splendid clothing and goes down, and Athena thought what to do next. 1:12. How Odysseus should awake and see the well-favored young girl, and she should be his guide to the city of the Phaiakians. Now the princess threw the ball towards one handmaiden and missed the girl, and the ball went into the swirling water, and they all cried out aloud because the ball's fallen in the water, and they don't want to go in the water. And noble Odysseus wakened and sat up and began pondering in his heart and in his spirit, "Ah me, what are the people whose land I have now come to this time? And are they violent and savage, and without justice, or hospitable to strangers with a godly mind? See now how an outcry of young women echoes about me, of nymphs who keep the sudden and sheer high mountain places and springs of the rivers and grass of the meadows. So he assumes from the landscape that he's in that he must be in the presence of nymphs, because nymphs tend to be located down by the sides of rivers. He does not think that he is meeting mortal women. He thinks he's meeting nymphs. He says, or am I truly in the neighborhood of human people I can converse with? But come now, I myself shall see what I can discover. So speaking, great Odysseus came from under his thicket, and from the dense foliage with his heavy hand he broke off a leafy branch to cover his body and hide the male parts, and went in the confidence of his strength, like some hill-kept lion, who advances, though he is rained on and blown by the wind, and both eyes kindle. He goes out after cattle or sheep, or it may be deer in the wilderness, and his belly is urgent upon him to get inside of a close steading and go for the sheep flocks. Now, this is an image, epic simile here, and Odysseus being likened to a hungry lion here, encountering young women, and there's at the very least a sense of sexual threat here to the young woman. I would have thought, not because he's a man and these are women, so much as the fact that he's naked and he's coming upon them. And Homer uses these metaphors here nonetheless. So there's a sense of tension there, and that sense that Odysseus, who had just been concealed by Kalypso, has now been revealed in his nakedness, and he's doing so in the presence of young women. And this is highly inappropriate, obviously, but it's going to require great cunning on Odysseus's part to know how to act here, and to first of all, he doesn't know what he's even encountering. So how shall he act? Well, we will see the mind of Odysseus here at work. 135. So Odysseus was ready to face young girls with well-ordered hair, naked though he was, for the need was on him, and yet he appeared terrifying to them, all crusted with dry spray, and they scattered one way and another down the jutting beaches. Only the daughter of Alcinous stood fast, for Athena put courage into her heart, and took the fear from her body, and she stood her ground, and faced him. And now Odysseus debated whether to supplicate the well-favored girl by clasping her knees, which is the traditional way in which you would greet somebody when you require their hospitality, fall on your knees and grasp her knees, or stand off where he was and in words of blandishment ask if she could show him the city and lend him clothing. Then in the division of his heart, because again, to be civilized was to do the former, on the other hand, recognizing the situation, he's going to break with the convention and do the latter, for fear that if he clasped her knees, the girl might be angry, as you can imagine. So blandishingly and full of craft, he began to address her. I am at your knees, O queen. So he acknowledges cleverly with his words what he ought to be doing with his actions, but isn't doing, because he's recognizing his state. But here's the blandishment, the flattery. Are you mortal or goddess? If indeed you are one of the gods who hold wide heaven, then I must find you in the nearest likeness to Artemis, the daughter of great Zeus. Why Artemis? She's a virgin and a huntress and beautiful, but renowned for her virginity, and thereby he's suggesting that he is not thinking of her in sexual terms. So he's very careful in his likeness here and the connotations thereof. And he says, for beauty, figure, and stature. But if you are one among whose mortals who live in this country, 3 times blessed are your father and lady your mother, and 3 times blessed your brothers too. And I know their spirits are warm forever with happiness at the thought of you, seeing such a slip of beauty taking her place in the chorus of dancers. But blessed at the heart, even beyond these others, is that one who, after loading you down with gifts, leads you as his bride home. I have never with these eyes seen anything like you, neither man nor woman. Wonder takes me as I look on you. But he did once see something like it before, and it was a tree by Apollo's altar, by Apollo's altar in Delos, the place where Apollo is worshipped. Well, this is a strange form of flattery to compare a young woman to a tree by Apollo's altar, but it is characteristic of ancient poetry, which we will see particularly in biblical poetry, say in the Song of Songs, where women are compared to inanimate objects in ways that we would not find flattering at all if we, and it would be unflattering if it was a physical likeness that was being suggested rather than something of great value, which is rather the case here. So he praises her, and he moves into the island of the Phaiakians, and he meets Alcinous, and Alcinous greets him, brought in by this man whom he does not know, and he treats him with hospitality. And then he is asked in book 7 here. In book 7, Odysseus prays at the outset, and he prays that he should receive a favorable reception in the city. And Odysseus speaks to Nausicaa first of all. No, sorry, let me backtrack here. Athena comes in the guise of a young woman carrying a pitcher, and she comes to Odysseus, and Odysseus questions this young woman who's actually Athena. He doesn't know it. And he says to Athena, i.e. the girl, "My child, would you not show me the way to the house of a certain man, Alcinous?" Because Odysseus has sent Nausicaa on ahead of him rather than arriving with her, because if he arrives with her, in the appearance that he is, he might get attacked, because there'll be an assumption that a man such as himself with the daughter of the king, that there's a threat there. So he decides that he will send her on ahead of him, and he will arrive after her. And this would be the best way to negotiate the reception that he will receive. So this is why he's speaking here. Would you not show me the way to the house of a certain man, Alcinous, who is lord over all these people? For I am an unhappy stranger, and I have come here a long way from a distant land, and I know nobody here of the people who keep this city and the fields about it. Then in turn the gray-eyed goddess Athena answered him, "Then, my friend and father, I will show you the house that you asked me to show, since the king lives close beside my own stately father. But go on in silence the while I lead the way for you, and do not give any of these people your eye. Neither ask them questions, for they do not have very much patience with men from the outlands, nor do they lovingly entertain the man come from elsewhere. They, confident in the speed of their running ships, cross over the great open water, since this is the gift of the earth shaker, Poseidon, to them whose ships move swift as thought, or as a winged creature." And so spoke Pallas Athena, and she leads them in. And he comes into the court of the Phaiakians and is received there, and he's received there rather badly, I must say, or rather with a mixed reception. Among other things, he is challenged there by some of the Phaiakians, and we see something that's characteristic of ancient Greek societies. In the palace of Alcinous, he meets residents holding a festival in honor of Poseidon, his great enemy. He's struck by the splendor of the palace, the opulence of the king and his court. And as soon as he sees the queen, he throws himself at her feet. So unlike the reception that with which he greeted her daughter, he throws himself at her feet, and the mist about him suddenly dissipates. And the king wonders how on earth he got there and who this man is. And he wonders whether this is in fact a god that is in front of him. And Odysseus, without revealing who he is, puts the king's suspicions at rest by telling him, "I am in fact a mortal man," and he explains to him his predicament. which is that he is a man who is far from home and he needs a passage back home. And Alcinous offers to help him, but before he does that, he offers his daughter Nausicaa's hand in marriage, which is an interesting proposal, and once again, one in which Odysseus requires great cunning in order to prevent him from causing offense. In book 8, I want to get to the wanderings here. Alcinous calls an assembly of all of the counselors of the Phaiakian court. And Athena ensures that there will be a large attendance by spreading the rumor that a godlike visitor has arrived and will be in the midst of the assembly. Now, Alcinous, the king, proposes that they provide a ship to the visitor so that he can go back home. This gains approval, in the midst of this passage, we meet the bard Demodocus, and he sings for them. So Demodocus is mentioned in line 44, and he sings, and when he sings, line 83, the famous singer sang for them, Odysseus responds in a way that reveals himself. He may be able to guard his words, but he cannot prevent himself from weeping at the tale that Demodocus tells, the tale of Achilles and Odysseus and the violence and the acts of the Trojan War. These bring tears to his eyes because of course, these are the things of great sorrow of the past and the loss of his friend Achilles. And he tries to hide his face from the others and shield himself. And I'll pick it up there in line 83. These things the famous singer sang for them, but Odysseus, taking in his ponderous hands the great mantle dyed in sea purple, drew it over his head and veiled his fine features, shamed for tears running down his face before the Phaiakians. And every time the divine singer would pause in his singing, he would take the mantle away from his head and wipe the tears. Up a two-handled goblet, would pour a libation to the gods. But every time he began again, and the greatest of the Phaiakians would urge him to sing, since they joyed in his stories, Odysseus would cover his head again and make lamentation. There, shedding tears, he went unnoticed by all the others, but Alcinous alone understood what he did and noticed, since he was sitting next to him and heard him groaning heavily. At once he spoke aloud to the oar-loving Phaiakians. Hear me, you leaders of the Phaiakians and men of counsel. By this time we have filled our desire for the equal feasting and for the lyre, which is the companion to the generous feast. Now let us go outside and make our endeavor in all contests, so that our stranger can tell his friends after he reaches his home by how much we surpass all others in boxing, wrestling, leaping, and speed of our feet for running. And so what takes place here is a games that are going to be held in honor of the guests, a athletic contest. And Odysseus is asked to participate, and he declines. And one of the athletes, mistaking the reasoning for his declining it, insults him. You know, you're a little bit old, long in the tooth, not capable of doing these things. And Odysseus takes up the challenge and participates in a discus toss. And he throws the discus so far beyond all the others that they are awed by this. And at that point, they have another feast. And at that point, Demodocus performs another song. And this time it's a light song, but it's a song of the sort of conduct that the Plato and the religious thinkers of ancient Greece found so scandalous. It's the story of a tryst between Ares and Aphrodite. so Mars and Venus. And they were caught in a web by Hephaestus, Aphrodite's husband. This is the story he tells. And at night, Odysseus, later that evening, Odysseus asks Demodocus to sing of a particular story near to his heart. And the story is that of the Trojan horse and the sack of Troy. And when Demodocus does as he has been asked to do, Odysseus breaks down. And Alcinous once again notices that he has done so, and he stops the music and says, okay, enough of this. Who are you, and where are you going? Could it be then that they have been some companions, a brave man knowing thoughts gracious towards you, since one who is your companion and has thoughts honorable towards you is of no less degree than a brother? Tell me who you are. And Odysseus responds in this way. He says, O great Alcinous, Book 9, preeminent among all people, surely indeed it is a good thing to listen to a singer, such as this one before us, who is like the gods in his singing. For I think there is no occasion accomplished that is more pleasant than when festivity holds sway among all the populace, and the feasters up and down the houses are sitting in order and listening to the singer, and beside them the tables are loaded with bread and meats, and from the mixing bowl the wine steward draws the wine and carries it about and fills the cups. This seems to my own mind to be the best of all occasions. But now your wish was inclined to ask me about my mournful sufferings, so that I must mourn and grieve even more. What then shall I recite to you first of all? What leave till later? Many are the sorrows the gods of the sky have given me. But now, first I will tell you my name, so that all of you may know me, and I, hereafter, escaping the day without pity, be your friend and guest, though the home where I live is far away from you. Line 19. I am Odysseus, son of Laertes, known before all men for the study of crafty designs, and my fame goes up to the heavens. I am at home in sunny Ithaca. There is a mountain there that stands tall, leaf-trembling Neritos, and there are islands settled around it, lying one very close to the other. There is Dulichion and Same, wooded Zacynthus, but my island lies low and away, last of all in the water towards the dark, with the rest facing east and sunshine, a rugged place, but a good nurse of men. For my part, I cannot think of any place sweeter on earth to look at. For in truth, Kalypso, shining among divinities, kept me with her in her hollow caverns, desiring me for her husband. And so likewise, Aeaean Circe, the guileful, detained me beside her in her halls, desiring me for her husband. But never could she persuade the heart within me. So it is that nothing is more sweet in the end than country and parents ever. Even when far away one lives in a fertile place, when it is an alien country far from his parents. But come, I will tell you of my voyage home with its many troubles, which Zeus inflicted on me as I came from Troy land. And then he tells him these tales. So books 9 through 12 here, in the storytelling of Odysseus, we get the story of Odysseus within the story of storied land, fabled lands of the Phaiakians within the story of Homer himself. And so there's something of the center of the Odyssey is about the wanderings of Odysseus, the man of many turns. And we get something of the importance and the effect of storytelling here as well, is the recovery of his identity through telling a story. So his identity had been latent or hidden on Kalypso's island, and by the act of remembering, it will cause him pain, but it will also help him recover his identity. So this is also being told here, and I think it's a fascinating passage simply for psychological reasons alone. Something about speaking and understanding who one is by putting one's thoughts into words and pulling them out of the realm of emotion and trauma, and to some degree distancing oneself from the trauma by speaking. And by telling a story of suffering loss, there's a means, I think, of recovering from the loss. So a sort of a poetic transgression. And thereby, I think what the poet Homer is doing is providing an early example of the power of mimesis, or recollection, of remembering. And remember, I said at the outset of the course, Homer himself, in calling upon the muses, is calling on the goddess of inspiration for epic poetry, but her mother is memory. And so Odysseus is calling upon his memory of the events that have transpired, and thereby he is becoming himself in the process. And this is all very fascinating. But book 9 begins, and I can't go through all of the different travails that Odysseus undergoes here in the land or on his voyages, but I am going to talk about a few of them. The first one is on the land of Polyphemus, because he talks about the Ciconians, which he kills at first, and then is beaten back by that, and they travel to the land of the Lotus Eaters. And we'll just spend I'll just pass over these ever so briefly. They go to the land of the Lotus Eaters, 84, who live on a flowering food, and there we set foot on the mainland and fetched water, and my companions soon took their supper there by the fast ships. But after we had tasted of food and drink, then I sent some of my companions ahead, telling them to find out what men eaters of bread might live here in this country. And I chose 2 men and sent a third with them as a herald. My men went on and presently met the Lotus Eaters, nor did these Lotus Eaters have any thoughts of destroying our companions, but they only gave them lotus to taste of. But any of them who ate the honey sweet fruit of lotus were unwilling to take my message back. So this is the threat of the Lotus Eaters. It is oblivion, the loss of memory, and the loss of desire to return. It's like going to the underworld. In the underworld, when at the end of all of the travails there, one is dipped in the river Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. Similarly, here in this world, the land of the Lotus Eaters is a land of dealing with pain by simply forgetting it. A great attraction, intoxicating oneself with the bud of the lotus. And one does not desire to come home if one eats of the lotus flower. So this is a threat to Odysseus in his arete, is simply to evade the hard journey which must follow if he seeks to simply, as I say, intoxicate himself and forget. So that's the first threat that he needs to overcome. The next is I'm going to deal with in greater detail. This is on the land of the Cyclops, line 116. And I'll read more of this here. But the Cyclops are a strange sort of figure, a figure that is that are solitaries. And line 25, we're told they have no ships. They have nor do they have builders of ships amongst them, who could have made them strong bench vessels, and they have no settlement, and they don't sow crops, and they don't have an assembly, and they don't have a harbor, and in fact they have nothing that marks civilization at all. They live as solitary individuals, and this marks them out as being fundamentally opposed to the Greek way of living, which is in living in cities rather than out in the wilderness, which is interesting and so very much opposed to the Western ideal that emerges post-Romanticism, or post-Enlightenment rather, of being on a desert island and being in a sort of a paradisal state. This is not how the Greeks saw the natural world. The natural world was a threatening place and not hospitable to man. And thereby, to be truly human, one needs to live in community. But not so the Cyclops. And they go down and they go into the cave to figure out who is there. Where will I pick it up? 2:16. They land, they go with wine to greet whoever might be there as a gift. And lightly we made our way to the cave, but we did not find him there. He was off herding on the range with his fat flocks, the Cyclops. We went inside the cave and admired everything inside it. Baskets were there, heavy with cheeses, and the pens crowded with lambs and kids. They had all been divided into separate groups, the firstlings in one place, and then the middle ones, and then the babies again by themselves. And all his vessels, milk pails and pans that he used for milking into, were running over with whey. From the start, my companion spoke to me and begged me to take some of the cheeses, come back again in the next time to drive the lambs and the kids from their pens, and get back quickly to the ship again and go sailing off across the salt water. So to steal, to plunder. This is booty that we've come upon here. There's nobody here. Let's take the lambs, the kids, the cheeses. Let's take all of them. Odysseus says that I would not listen to them. It would have been better their way. Not until I could see him. See if he could give me presents. Odysseus doesn't want to be satisfied with what he has. He also wants the arete of being given gifts from a host. My friends were to find the sight of him in no way lovely. There we were. We built a fire and made sacrifice, and helping ourselves to the cheeses, we ate and sat waiting for him inside until he came from his herding. He carried a heavy load of dried out wood to make a fire for his dinner and threw it down inside the cave, making a terrible crash. So in fear, we scuttled away into the cave's corners. Next, he drove into the wide cavern, all from the fat flocks that he could milk. But he left all the male animals, billy goats and rams, outside in his yard with the deep fences. Next thing, he heaved up and set into position the huge doorstop, a massive thing. No 22 of the best four-wheeled wagons could have taken that weight off the ground and carried it. Such a piece of sky-towering cliff that was he set over his gateway. Next, he sat down and milked his sheep and his bleating. So the Cyclops is a giant figure, so strong that the stopper that he puts in the mouth of the cave, that they could never budge if there had been an army of them. But finally, when he's finished the milking, he turns around and identifies them. Strangers, who are you? From where do you come sailing over the watery ways? Is it on some business? Or are you recklessly roving, as pirates do, when they sail on the salt sea and venture their lives as they wander, bringing evil to alien people? So he spoke, and the inward heart in us was broken in terror of the deep voice, and for seeing him so monstrous. But even so, I had words for an answer, and I said to him, we are Achaeans, coming from Troy, beaten off our true course by winds from every direction across the great gulf of the open sea, making for home by the wrong way, on the wrong courses. So we have come. So it has pleased Zeus to arrange it. We claim we are of the following of the son of Atreus, Agamemnon, whose fame now is the greatest thing under heaven. Such a city was that he sacked and destroyed so many people. But now in turn we come to you as and are suppliants at your knees. If you might give us a guest present or otherwise some gift of grace, for such is the right of strangers. Therefore respect the gods, O best of men. We are your suppliants, And Zeus, the guest god who stands behind all strangers with honors due them, avenges any wrong towards strangers and suppliants. So I spoke. But he answered me with pitiless spirit. Stranger, you are a simple fool or come from far off when you tell me to avoid the wrath of the gods or fear them. The Cyclops do not concern themselves over Zeus of the Aegis, nor any of the rest of the blessed gods, since we are far better than they. And for fear of the hate of Zeus, I would not spare you or your companions either, if the fancy took me otherwise. But tell me, so I may know, where did you put your well-made ship when you came? Nearby or far off? So he spoke, trying me out, but I knew too much and was not deceived, and answered him in turn, and my words were crafty. Poseidon, shaker of the earth, has shattered my vessel. He drove it against the rocks on the outer coast of your country. Cracked on a cliff, it is gone. The wind on the sea took it. But I, with these you see, got away from sudden destruction. Now, Odysseus prides himself here on his cunning and his craftiness. Crafty because he deceived him in not telling him the truth, that his ship was harbored out away from his gaze. Not so crafty, however, in his lie, because he mentions that it was Poseidon that broke apart his ship. Because Poseidon, ironically, turns out to be none other than the father of the man whom he has just told the lie to, and he, seeing that Poseidon, his father, had hated this man, decides that's it for this guy. And so I spoke, says Odysseus, but he in pitiless spirit answered nothing, but sprang up and reached for my companions, caught up two together, and slapped them like killing puppies against the ground. And the brains ran all over the floor, soaking the ground. Then he cut them up limb by limb and got supper ready, and like a lion reared in the hills without leaving anything, ate them. Entrails, flesh, and the marrowy bones alike. We cried out aloud and held our hands up to Zeus, seeing the cruelty of what he did, but our hearts were helpless. But when the Cyclops had filled his enormous stomach, feeding on human flesh and drinking down milk unmixed with water, he lay down to sleep in the cave, sprawled through his sheep. Then I took counsel with myself and my great-hearted spirit to go up close, drawing from beside my thigh the sharp sword, and stab him in the chest, where the midriff joins on the liver, feeling for the place with my hand. But the second thought stayed me, for there we too would have perished away in sheer destruction, seeing that our hands could never have pushed from the lofty gate of the cave the ponderous boulder he had propped there. So, morning we waited, just as we were, for the divine dawn. And of course, then the Cyclops keeps on killing them and eating them. And this grisly fate that they are encountering here. And they cast lots and decide what they are going to do. And what they do is they take a great beam, because in their the Cyclops leaves the boulder in the doorway when he departs, and then replaces it when he comes back in. In his absence, they take a long stem, a tree trunk, and they carve it to an edge, and they fire the point so that it's hardened. And it's an green olive beam. And what they do with this is while the Cyclops, after he's eaten another couple of their companions, and he's sleeping there in a drunken sleep because they've given him wine to drink, and he promises Odysseus that he will eat him last. That's the gift that he will give him. You'll be the last one I eat. So he'll have to watch all of his companions be eaten. They drive the beam of the olive tree into his eye, like a man 384, with a brace and bit who bores into a ship timber, and his men from underneath grasping the strap on either side, whirl it, and it bites resolutely deeper. So seizing the fire-pointed hardened timber, we twirled it in his eye, and the blood boiled around the hot point, so that the blast and scorch of the burning ball singed all his eyebrows and eyelids, and the fire made the roots of his eye crackle. As when a man who works as a blacksmith plunges a screaming great axe blade or plane into the water, treating it for temper, since this is the way steel is made strong, even so Cyclops' eye sizzled about the beam of the olive. Oh, I forgot an important passage here. Just before this deed which they had planned, he was asked his name, and Odysseus tells him that his name is Nobody. Nobody is my name. My father and mother call me Nobody, as do all the others who are my companions. And he says, okay, well then Nobody I will eat last. Nobody. Okay, so then they blind him, and he gives a terrible cry, and he pulls the timber out of his eyes, and he cries out, and the cry out goes to the other Cyclops, and they come running to his aid at this cry. And they say to him, 402, why, Polyphemus, what do you want with all this outcry through the immortal night, and have made us all thus sleepless? Surely no mortal against your will can be driving your sheep off. Surely none can be killing you by force or treachery. Then from inside the cave, strong Polyphemus answered, good friends, nobody is killing me by force or treachery. One of the famous passages in the entirety of the Odyssey, with great irony. He's making a declarative statement, which they misinterpret by virtue of the fact that nobody has the double meaning of no one. So nobody's doing anything by force or treachery. And so then the other speaking in winged words gave him an answer. If alone as you are, none uses violence on you, why then there's no avoiding the sickness sent by great Zeus. So you'd better pray to your father, the Lord Poseidon. Nobody can rescue you then. If nobody's harming you, then it's a sickness and we can do nothing about it. Pray to your father. At any rate, as he departs from there, Odysseus does a very foolish thing. And it's partly because he's so outraged at the terrible conduct he's received as a guest at the hands of Poseidon. And it is this, having told him initially and very cleverly and cannily that he is nobody, he then reveals his actual name. And he said, you asked who I was, and I will tell you who I am. And you may want to remember this when you are on your own. My name is Odysseus, sacker of cities. Odysseus from Ithaca. And when he is told this name, the Cyclops cries out to his father Poseidon that this man Odysseus has done this, Odysseus from Ithaca. And of course, this is the very thing that reveals Odysseus and allows Poseidon to prevent him from getting home. So this voyage has been altered by the fact that Odysseus has told the truth. And so let the reader understand one must be very careful in revealing one's identity and in general adopt the posture that the gods themselves use in relation to mortals to disguise oneself. This is the essence of wisdom being presented in the Odyssey. So I will leave off book 9 there. Let me deal briefly with book 10, and I'll try and come through some of the other ones here. When they leave this land, so after he tells him that he's Odysseus, sacker of cities, and he calls out from the boat, the Cyclops throws a huge boulder and almost capsizes the ship. But at this point, they come to the island of Aeolus, which is a place where the winds are loosed, and there's a bag of winds, which is given, which is the source of the winds on the earth, and Aeolus gives Odysseus a bag containing all of the winds in order to get home, and he tells him to keep the bag closed. I'll give you a west wind to guide you home, but don't open this bag whatever you do. And Odysseus' companions, in the very site of Ithaca, so almost back home on the west coast of Greece. Odysseus' shipmates think that Aeolus has secretly given Odysseus a fortune in gold and silver, and they tear the bag open and the winds get out. And what they do then is they produce a storm, and that pushes them back all the way to Aeolia, where they began before. And Aeolus this time refuses to help them because he presumes from this action that the gods do not want Odysseus to come home. And from thence, they row, and they row to the land of the Lastrygonians. And these are a race of giants. And they have a king and a queen, Antiphates and the queen whose name is unknown. And they are going to turn Odysseus's scouts, those that he sends before them, into dinner. And of course, the Lastrygonians, like the Polyphemus, are cannibals. And if you want to see a literary parallel in a work that you may be more familiar with, in C.S. Lewis's The Silver Chair, the giants that they meet there are likewise the eaters of men. From thence, they go on to a place called Aea, and Aea is the home of the beautiful Circe, who is a goddess but also a witch. And Circe is a figure of lust. So around line 250 here. And she casts a spell over men by turning them into swine. If they consume her drink here, they are turned into something like swine rather, and they wallow in the mud. And she pens them there. And Odysseus would, of course, fallen into the same trap had he not been warned away from doing so by Hermes, who appears around line 300 and gives this advice, 289. I will tell you all the malevolent guiles of Circe. She will make you a potion and put drugs in the food, but she will not even so be able to enchant you. For this good medicine, which I give you now, will prevent her. I will tell you the details of what to do. As soon as Circe, with her long wand, strikes you, then drawing from beside your thigh your sharp sword, rush forward against Circe, as if you were raging to kill her, and she will be afraid, and invite you to go to bed with her. Do not then resist and refuse the bed of the goddess, for so she will set free your companions, and care for you also. But bid her swear the great oath of the blessed gods that she has no other evil hurt that she's devising against you. So she will not make you weak and unmanned once you are naked. So spoke Argefontes. And so he comes upon her with the sword, and he takes from her, line 332, this thing that she has in her hand, and it's the holy moly. It's literally the holy moly. And with this holy moly, he is to take this and go down to the underworld. And at the conclusion of book 11, at the conclusion of book 10, they go down to the underworld and discover that on their way back, that in order to get back home, they must first go down to the realm of the dead, to the Hades, and they need to speak to somebody there by the name of Tiresias, who will reveal to them how it is they are to get home. So they go to the river of Ocean in the land of the Cimmerians, Cimmerians with a C, Cimmerians, and they perform a sacrifice there. And the first one that appears to them is somebody that they left behind without realizing they left behind, namely one of their companions whose name is Elpenor. And he has not been able to get into the underworld because he has not been buried. And Elpenor implores him to return after you've left this place back to Circe's island and give his body a proper burial, which Odysseus then agrees to do. Very interesting things are being said here about Greek religion and about the way of treating even dead bodies. says something about their understanding of human nature here. I have no time to get into that in any great detail. If you're interested, I talk about this a bit on a podcast that I do called Paideia Today. Dr. Friesen and I get into this subject matter in some detail. But suffice to say, they go down to the underworld and they go to speak with Tiresias. Now, Tiresias, for his part, is a famous figure that we will meet more than once, but particularly in the work that is to follow this that we'll look at, namely Oedipus the King, Oedipus Rex, where the prophet Tiresias is blind and still in the land of the living. But Tiresias reveals that it's Poseidon who's punishing them, and doing so for having blinded his son Polyphemus, and he foretells what is to come, namely that he will return home, he will reclaim his wife, and he will regain his palace from the suitors who've been eating him out of house and home. And then at the end of all of that, having returned home, he will leave and make one final voyage to appease Poseidon. And that in that voyage, then he will stick his oar upright in the land, suggesting that he will have no voyages, no further voyages. And he gives one last warning. He says, when you leave here and you go to the flocks of the sun, on your way back home, whatever you do, do not touch the flocks of the sun god, Helios, because otherwise you will not get home without losing all of your men. You might get back, but nobody else will come back. And so Odysseus, while he's there in the underworld speaking to Tiresias, speaks to a variety of figures, one of them including one of them who is his mother. So his father's alive back home. His mother, Anticlea, is here in the underworld. He also speaks to another figure, and I think this is probably worthy if I can find the passage here. He speaks to the figure who is the most important figure in the Iliad, namely Achilles. Where is this? Where is Achilles here? I don't have my other. Oh, gosh. There it is. He encounters Achilles in the underworld. First time he's seen him since he left him behind, and not realizing that he had been killed. And he gives them blood to drink and allows them to speak. And he praises Achilles for his great deeds in life. And Achilles responds to him in these words: son of Laertes and seed of Zeus, resourceful Odysseus, hard man, what made you think of this bigger endeavor? How could you endure to come down here to Hades' palace where the senseless dead men dwell, mere imitations of perished mortals? So he spoke. And I again to him in answer, son of Peleus, far the greatest of the Achaeans, Achilles, I come for the need to consult Tiresias, if he might tell me, line 480, some plan by which I come back to rocky Ithaca. For I have not yet been near Achaean country, nor ever set foot on my land, but always I have troubles. Achilles, no man before has ever been more blessed than you, nor ever will be. Before, when you were alive, we Argives honored you as we did the gods. And now in this place, you have great authority over the dead. Do not grieve, even in death, Achilles. Now you would expect that Achilles would receive these words with great joy, because he chose to die a young man rather than live a rich old life and die of old age. And he's famous, and the Greeks live for their fame, their arete, the fame that they will have that will live far beyond their earthly lives, and others will sing the praises of Achilles. But how does Achilles respond? This is the same Achilles written by the same author. He responds in this way: O shining Odysseus, never try to console me for dying. I would rather follow the plow as thrall to another man, in other words, as a slave, one with no land allotted him and not much to live on, than be a king over all the perished dead. But come now, tell me anything you have heard of my proud son, whether or not he went along to war to fight as a champion, and tell me anything you've heard about stately Peleus, whether he still keeps his position among the Myrmidon hordes, or whether in Hellas and Phthia they have diminished his state because old age constrains his hands and feet, and I am no longer there under the light of the sun to help him. So the Iliad, the whole story of the Iliad was there about Achilles' anger that he was dishonored by Agamemnon, refusing to fight. In the end, his desire for honor was so strong, he would accept no disrespect from anyone, and he died at a young age with his honor intact. But now that he finds himself in the underworld, he says that he would rather have lived to a ripe old age than be the king of the dead. Now, this says something about their understanding of the afterlife. This is no great place to be, and no one wants to be there, however virtuous. Now, this is a very different thing and different notion of the afterlife than that which the Christian era will see. And to some degree, even the Romans have a better understanding, a division of the realm of the just and the realm of the unjust, even if it's still in both cases in the underworld. But it's a shadowy existence, and one in which no man is eager to go. And so life is however well one has lived one's life, it is that death is a terrible thing. And with that, I think I'm going to close. If I didn't get to it, but book 12, they in fact do slay the cattle of Helios, and of course end up being punished for it with the loss of all their companions, and only Odysseus comes back. But I will pick it up in book 13, and I will see you next time with that.